therapy, and I did recover, and I did have my left leg. It was shorter from the radiation and thinner, and then the cancer came back when I was 13, and they couldn't do any more radiation, so they amputated below the knee, and then I got my chemo at Sloan Kettering. Actually, my father had gotten a job in New York, so we had moved there. And then it's been, just uniquely adapting to life as an amputee ever since, and being grateful to be alive.
You were 13 years old, you said, when you had your amputation?
Yeah. Yeah, and I was, at the time, I was more worried about my hair, honestly, than my legs,
Listen, 13-year-old boys and girls, I mean, they're worried about their appearances and all these kinds of things that might seem a little superficial, because bone cancer can be lethal, and we're so happy, not in your situation, but for some people it can be. But yet, children can think about these superficial things. It's actually the beautiful thing about the innocence of children, that they think about those things. But how was it as a teenager, going through your teenage years, having gone through an amputation? How did you manage? How did you cope?
Well, I felt I was very academic. So I was a reader and very studious, and my dream was to go to Harvard or some other Ivy League school. So I was very studious. I wasn't a partier or anything. I was sick through most of it.
Yes.
So it was more like just choosing whatever I could do to stay above the trauma of it, the stress of it. So I did have some good girlfriends, and really focused on getting through, and a very loving family, extremely loving family, a funny, Irish family, so really funny. So that helped a lot.
What about exercise and activity? Obviously, you got a prosthetic limb. It allowed you to be up and to be walking, but as the years and decades moved on, what about sports or exertion, exercise? We talk about that in terms of general health. Have you been able to find a way and participate in sporting activities and exercise? Do you go to the gym, that kind of stuff?
Yeah, so at the time, before I lost my leg, I was a gymnast and a ballerina and a swimmer, so I was always very athletic. And I stopped through high school. I really didn't do anything. I did crunches through high school.
Crunches?
Abs. Yes. Your abdominals, keep your abdominals strong, because my sister told me I was getting fat.
Oh, that's a sister for you.
Yeah, well, she was right. And then in college, I had an okay prosthesis, and it got me around, but there was a lot of blisters. And then I think in the late 80s, the prosthetic started to change, and I got one that was just a suspension sleeve. And I was able to do so much more walking, and then I started to do jazz dance again, and then that led back to African, and now I do flamenco and yoga. I started doing yoga in the 80s. So definitely the prosthetics made a difference for me, because I really wanted to be on my feet.
Yeah, certainly there's no doubt about it, and engineering advances and material advances in terms of prosthetics becoming lighter, and the control and the computer integration into the technology of ankles and knees, etc. I mean, prostheses have evolved so much and have really allowed people with an amputation to really do so much more and integrate much further back into society and community, and to do all the things that you're talking about. And many times, the layperson's eye, they're not even going to see. They have no idea.
No.
And you know what? I will admit to you, as a physician in practice for many years, and a physiatrist, a rehab doctor who's used to all of this, several times, I don't treat amputees primarily, but people with heart and lung disease, and I always squeeze the ankles to check for fluid. And I've squeezed many a prosthetic ankle, saying there's no fluid here. And my patients looked at me and said, "Well, that's obvious, isn't it? That's my prosthetic limb." And I'm like, "Oh my gosh."
See, I've been there.
Yeah, fool me. Let's talk about yoga. When did you discover yoga?
Well, I discovered it at the Guinness Book of World Records.
In the Guinness Book of World Records?
Yes, I think there was a story about a yogi who did some crazy move, and I was a gymnast, so I'm sure I tried it. And
how old were you when this was going on?
Oh, maybe like 10.
Oh,
yeah,
wow,
I was always upside down in childhood. Hence my perspective on life.
Yeah.
And then when I was in my early 20s, I was living in Los Angeles, and a friend of mine was from Great Britain, and she had a lovely accent. And we were out in the desert in Joshua Tree, and she said, "Would you like to try some yoga?" I said, "Okay."
That's how we say it in Great Britain.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah, yoga. Yes. No,
yoga.
I'm going along with you.
Yes, so we were on a big rock, and she taught me sun salutation, and it was as if I had known it forever. I just knew what to do. And then we heard this strange panting sound, and we thought this can either be a mountain lion or a coyote, and so we need to get out of here. And, of course, I couldn't run, so that was really helpful.
Yeah, yoga.
But that was my first experience.
Yoga and sprinting are two things you need if you're practicing
sprinting.
yoga in next to mountain lions.
Yeah, I think so.
There's no doubt about it.
So.
Yeah. You're listening to Dr. Radio on Sirius XM Channel 110. This is The Rehab Show. I'm Dr. Jonathan Weitz, and my guest is Marsha Danzig. We're talking about yoga for amputees. Marsha has a below-knee amputee or amputation, and she is founder of Yoga for Amputees. She's also author of the book, Yoga for Amputees, The Essential Guide to Finding Wholeness After Limb Loss. This was published last year, 2018. Of course, for our listeners, the lines are open, 1-877-NYU-DOCS. It's 1-877-698-3627. If you yourself have had an amputation and you have a question for Marsha about how you can get involved with yoga, give us a call. Perhaps you don't have an amputation, but you want to ask a question about yoga, because Marsha, whether you have an amputation or you don't, she can guide you with regards to yoga just in general, because she's a great I don't know, do we call you a yogi, or that's something reserved for...
Yeah, you could call us yogis. Yogis are practitioners.
There you go.
I'm no guru.
No guru. No, I'm no guru either, but we don't need to be to give advice. Anyway, the lines are open, 1-877-698-3627. So, Marsha, you have your below-knee amputation of your left leg.
Mm-hmm.
You're into yoga. You cannot sprint away from a mountain lion, but hopefully you don't need to do that too often. Tell us what you have experienced through yoga. What has it done for you?
Well, for me personally, it built my confidence quite a bit, because, number one, I did it barefoot. And so it was really an opportunity to just be me. And I think until I started to do yoga, I was always hiding my prosthesis because I didn't really want to seem different. And I didn't always feel like telling the story because amputees get asked that a lot.
Marsha, when you say you did it barefoot, I know your right foot was barefoot.
Yeah.
Are you saying that you took your prosthesis off from the left leg, so the left leg was sort of there for all to see and notice that you had an amputation?
Oh yeah, that's a good perspective. No, barefoot, as in I just took my shoes off.
Right. Okay.
And and during the yoga training, the prosthesis at the time that I had a skin cover.
Yeah.
And by the end of the training, it was all ripped up, and so I had Band-Aids on it. And
in case it bled?
Backing up, yes, to keep the skin from, So I can't believe you have Band-Aids on your prosthetic leg. But it just brought it all out to be open, and it was no big deal. But I used to think it was a really big deal to be exposed in that way. I was always very shy. So I think confidence was the first thing. And then just incredible balance. And that's dramatically changed for me. And for me, it's the deeper practices of yoga, the meditation and the deep breathing that helped me to cope with a lot of stressors. I had kidney failure in my 30s and congestive heart failure in my 40s and a transplant, big things. And I won't say I've sailed through, but I've definitely done better than a lot of people because my mind was more in the moment and was able to bounce back. And I think that's actually the physiological effects of what happens to your brain and your body when you do more yoga.
So that's interesting, and maybe there's more about you than I realized. I perhaps didn't know all these details. You had kidney failure, and then you had a transplant. You said, was that a kidney transplant or?
Yes, I did. I had a kidney transplant in 2006.
Gosh,
Yeah.
I did not know that. No,
Yep.
I did not know that. And
It's been a journey.
it's been a journey, yeah, for sure. It's been a journey. There's no doubt about it. So tell us how yoga helped you personally. Before we talk about how it can help others, etc., how did it help you personally through all of these trials and tribulations? Because really, for much of your life that you remember since when you were 5 years old on, you have been dealing with medical issues, and yet as I talk to you and I see this, I mean, your book, by the way, the picture, and the reason why I asked you about whether you do yoga with your leg on or off is the picture on the front of the book has you sitting there in an incredible pose with wonderful posture and balance, but without your prosthesis on. You sound so vibrant. You are so vibrant. It's not that you sound. The photograph, your face, your smile is so beautiful and genuine and so broad. Has it been yoga that has taken you through life and given you the perspective and given you the strength, not just the confidence to show your leg, but just the inner strength of your core? Has it contributed in that way?
It really has, yeah, because yoga means yoking. So it actually means yoking with the divine, and I am a very spiritual person. So a big part of yoga that doesn't always get focused on is that the yoga poses are designed to peel away the layers that keep you from your highest essence, we'll say. And for me, I've always been in touch with that highest essence, and for me that's joy. So yoga was a way to build the inner essence, the inner self, and to know that no matter what, there is this strong sense of inner self that's connected to something bigger. For me, that's God or whatever people believe. That there's always a bigger purpose and a bigger plan. And so for me, it's been about embodying grace and beauty and celebrating the gift of life through the practice. And also the practice actually, for whatever reason, the physiological benefits for me have been to be able to express the grace and beauty out in the world. So it works both ways somehow. So that's an idea of yoking, between I always think of cows or cattle or whatever that have the yoke.
Yes.
Yeah, that's the idea.
Well, it's so interesting how you say it sort of allowed you to, or yoga itself allows you to strip away what keeps you from your best self, I think, if I'm sort of nuancing your words, and allows you to achieve that strength of that inner strength that you have, and clearly you are achieving that. I'm sure it's an ongoing process. It's not something you achieve and then you can say, okay, I'll stop doing this now. It is something that continues to give you energy. Again, for our listeners, the lines are open. 1-877-NYU Docs. That's 1-877-698-3627. If you yourself have a story to share in terms of how yoga has helped you transform your lives, gain your inner strength, helped you overcome adversity, share your story. Give us a call. 1-877-698-3627. Let's talk, Marsha, about the book. The book, it's a big book. There's a lot in here. I love it, though. I don't like books that I can't sort of open and flick and find relevance on each page that I flick to. Each page of your book, by the way, has photos, it has instructions, it has discussion, but it's so readable, it's so visually appealing. I think it's a highly practical book, so that's number one. Number two is, what are some of the challenges that people with an amputation may face when it comes to doing yoga? As you said, it takes balance and poise and posture. People who have had an amputation, whether it's the lower limb or the upper limb, they often lose that. So what are some of the challenges?
Yes, for sure. So I think a big one is the core, that a lot of people who lost limbs didn't really exercise very much and don't really have a strong sense of core. And so you really need that in order to lift yourself up from a chair or, go to the bathroom or get in and out of a car. So I think that becomes more pronounced when you lose a limb, how much you use your core. And so we focus a lot on that in the program. I think there can be a lot of misalignment in the body because, let's face it, there's always going to be a foot or an arm that's not real, and so the body accommodates that. So there could be more strength on one side, and one side could be weaker. So yoga helps to balance that out too by building strength on both sides. I also think for a lot of us, the mental exhaustion piece is something that doesn't always get addressed, and I actually think that has physical manifestations, headaches, pain, tight jaw, tension in the lower back. And I do think there is mental exhaustion from navigating life as an amputee, especially, a place like New York City where it's just, there's a lot going on.
Yes.
And there's not always accessibility and just the basics like, am I going to be able to go up those stairs today? Or, is this going to be a problem? So there is that mental stress that comes up, and I think that yoga helps you deal with the moment-by-moment stressors in a really profound way. Also pain. I think pain is another huge one. Phantom pain in general, chronic pain, and yoga has just been found to be astronomically helpful. There's so much research now on it.
Do you find yoga as a part of most rehab programs, or is it still yet to be introduced?
Yeah. Well, that's my vision. My vision is that it will be part of, every rehab program because it's cost effective for one, and it's pretty accessible to everybody. I mean, the people who teach it don't necessarily have to be yoga teachers. I mean, you can hire a yoga therapist or a yoga teacher, which is great, which is a whole other level. But basic movements and basic breathing techniques, everybody in the clinic can do that. And I think it's just so practical and simple. The challenge is always getting people to be consistent about it.
Yes.
But that's the same with anything, physical therapy.
Yeah, it is. It's the same with any kind of lifestyle, addition that we have, whether it's exercise or a diet or quitting smoking or quitting alcohol. It's lifelong, and yoga is the same.
Yeah.
It is a lifelong participation because it keeps giving. Marsha, sadly, we're going to run out of time. Again, I want to tell people, because, this is so important, that the book is Yoga for Amputees, The Essential Guide to Finding Wholeness After Limb Loss. It was published in 2018, and Marsha Danzig, our guest, we're speaking with her, is the author. It's a wonderful book, very practical. How can people find out more information about you, about yoga, about your book? Is there a website that people can go to if they're interested?
Yes, there is. So it's yogaforamputees.com, and we have online global classes once a month. That'll start again in September. I've got trainings for clinicians, for acute care, for yoga teachers, and workshops, professional development. And then I have a lot of free yoga videos for amputees to practice yoga on my YouTube site. And then the book is available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. Sometimes a local library will have it these days, or they can request it. And they're welcome to write to me at yoga for, Y-O-G-A, for, the number 4, amputees at gmail.com, and happy to direct them. But yeah, there's a lot of good stuff for people to have access to. That's my goal, because I know a lot of amputees get hit with a lot of expenses. With the recovery.
Yeah, without a doubt, life changes and can become very expensive, and accessibility is very difficult, and transportation changes and all sorts of things. And support groups, I know, are very, very important. I think you were here talking with our support group, if I'm not mistaken, at some point, which is wonderful. And some support groups meet in person, and some support groups meet sort of online in chat groups. But it's all so very important. And Marsha, there's no doubt that you play, and yoga plays such an important role here for individuals who've had an amputation. And I want to thank you for sharing so much about yourself, and I want to thank you for translating your experiences and your knowledge into this book and into sharing with other individuals who've had an amputation, because it's so beneficial to them. Marsha, thank you so much. Hopefully we can meet again on Dr. Radio or in person. So good luck, and thank you so much. All right, that's Marsha Danzig, and thank you, very much appreciated. We're heading to the break right now. When we come back, sleep and recovery / rehabilitation with